Board game night is awesome. Those are the nights I look forward to most. Hanging out with friends, joking, laughing, trying to excel at a challenging puzzle. But if you're anything like me, you might also be thinking, I hope this goes well. Especially if you're the one bringing out the game. Board game night can have a bit of a dark side. So while board games can foster incredible social experiences, those experiences tend to be driven by victory conditions. This means winning and losing. This means possible hurt feelings and bruised egos. Players may complain or whine. They may disengage from the game or be a sore loser. The game state could fall apart, causing the scaffolding of the controlled social interaction provided by the board game to collapse, leading to potentially negative experiences. Game night has the potential to be ruined. Welcome to my channel. My name's Chance, and this is Table Talk. So today's topic is going to be on winning in board games. More specifically, it's going to be about a player's relationship to winning in board games, and how I believe that can be the source of a lot of the most damaging behaviors that we see at the board gaming table. Before diving into this topic, I want to call out a podcast called So Very Wrong About Games. I've been kind of binge listening to them recently, and while doing a bit of a, let's call it, research for this episode, I came across episode number 283, titled Calling It a Win. This episode talks about a lot of things that I'll be mentioning in this video, so if you're interested in this topic at all, I highly recommend giving them a listen. I'll be leaving a link in the description below. So, before getting into some of the player behavior issues, let's just start off by talking about winning, because that's kind of the core of what I'll be discussing here. Basically, board games generally require victory conditions. Now, there's some games that I know they don't have victory conditions, like we have Dorfromantik or Mythwind. These are part of those games that are referred to as unranked games. For this discussion, I'm gonna ignore those. I have another probably video that I'll discuss those ones on, but for now we're just gonna move on and say that victory conditions in board games are what make your actions meaningful in a game. And I would say, trust me on this, because I've tried to put together a prototype of a game where I was just like, oh, I have a cool idea for mechanics. I did the mechanics, put together some of the cards, played it, I was like, oh, this is neat, okay, yep. But then, very quickly it turned into kind of a, wait, what's the point of this? Like, why am I doing these actions? So basically, victory conditions really provide the framework for a game. It gives players choices meaning in a game. But I'm also going to say that I think I can provide a strong argument for the game's victory condition being the root of many of the bad behaviors at the table. Remember, victory conditions mean winning and losing. Winning and losing brings in a player's egos. So the question is, what does it mean to them if they win? Are they proving they're smart? Are they securing their status and saying they belong? What about losing? Do they now feel dumb? Are they embarrassed? Do they feel attacked and judged? Are these thoughts and beliefs conscious or unconscious? So that's where we're going to be heading in this. Now, before I get in, one more thing to say before I get into these behaviors, because I don't want to feel like I'm attacking anyone in this. I want to state that I've had some of these issues. Like, I'm not calling out any players specifically on this. Like, I've done some of these things. And unfortunately, it's, I'm just not perfect. I'm very close to perfect, really working on it, just probably just that far away. Just a little bit longer and I'll be there. But overall, I have had these problems, and I think that it's unfortunate when these behaviors come up. I think that these are kind of emotional responses to situations, and we don't always have control of those emotions in the moment. That's something that we can work on developing, and I'll be discussing this a little bit in the solutions. And another thing I want to mention is that I don't think players are going to a hobby board game night and they're saying to themselves, like, I'm only going to have fun if I win. That's not the type of people I play with. I don't think I've encountered anyone like that. Now, there are some people that are much more competitive, and they are in that state, like they are competitive in board games, and they are going to be trying hard. I think that's totally okay. Like, that's another class of board gamer. But in a lot of the groups I play with, that's just not the personalities that I see. I think that, like I said, these emotions are just triggered. That's not that they only are going to have fun if they win. It's just that winning and losing, like I said, brings out that ego, brings up these emotions, and kind of brings up these maybe even uncontrollable situations for them. So I want to be clear that this discussion is coming from a place of interest in player dynamics and kind of the causes of the behaviors, and not of personal judgment on anyone. All right, so now we can get started. First up, let's dive into, and let's call it early game issues, and I want to set the scene here. So board game night, we kicked it off, someone brought a game, excited to play it, they spent time learning it, and they are ready for the teach. They make it through the teach, everyone has a decent idea of what they're doing, but you know, new game, so it can be tough to figure out your path in a new game. And that person that got done with the teach, maybe they have a bit of anxiety around the game. They're saying, oh, I hope this goes well. Like, I hope people enjoy this. Like, I was excited to do this. Like, I bring games that I'm excited to play. I want people to have a good time with them. I do my research on my board games. I say, this looks like a lot of fun. And I have some kind of value tied up in other people enjoying that game. But what I've had happen on game nights is we get to one of the players and the game starts with I have no idea what I'm doing in this. Like, I don't know what a good move is. There's too many options. Like, I'm gonna do terrible at this game. This just kicks things off with such a negative state that it just instantly brings down the mood of the game. I've literally been in situations where, like, I've taught the game, or even we get in that first 2 or 3 turns, and it's like, I've been like, oh, this game might have been a mistake. I don't know if I should have brought this to game night. And it sucks. Like, it really does suck when that happens. I don't wish that to happen to anyone at game night. Now, this is getting into the topic of just the generic player behavior of complaining and whining. I don't think all complaining and whining is associated with the desire to win, but I think there is a certain class of complaining and whining that it's a bit of a defense mechanism. It is a protection. So by that player stating, like in that example I gave, by saying like, oh, I have no idea what I'm doing, like I don't know what a good choice is in this, they are kind of in a way, maybe unconsciously, giving them permission to do bad in the game. They're giving themselves permission to do bad in that game. They're saying like, okay, if I lose, no one can judge me on it because I already stated that I'm gonna do bad. So it opens up that path for them to just not be successful. Which it's like, we're not all gonna win every board game. Well, I play with 4 other people usually, or well, 3 to 4 other people, so I'm gonna lose maybe 75% of my games. And play with one guy that he wins probably 50% of the game, so I'm gonna lose even more than that because he's really good. But either way, it's the situation where that player has kind of protected themselves, they've insulated themselves from kind of that loss condition a little bit, from that judgment that comes with loss. And I think that has to do with kind of that relationship to winning. It's not that they're going in and saying, I need to win this game, it's that they feel that maybe they're gonna be judged if they don't win. Maybe they feel they're gonna be judged if they do poorly. And I think that can be kind of one of those sources of that complaining and whining during a board game. And that's one of those things that brings down the mood, creates a negative experience. Unfortunately, there's not a lot you can do in this. You can't control another player's emotions. You can just kind of continue along. It's one of those things where I think it's a power through moment. Try not to let that player's behavior impact yours. Kind of recognize that they're in their own mind state. Maybe it is a defense mechanism for them, and just kind of continue on and let that player work through their own emotions on their own time. Ideally, you can kind of still be engaged and try to find some enjoyment in the game. Maybe even if you're struggling with some of the game, maybe start voicing that, because I always find that the phrase misery loves company is true. So if you can kind of join in and be like, oh yeah, I'm like really struggling with this. Like I don't know the best path. I'm like all these options in the board state are really giving me a hard time. And then essentially kind of just be in that situation with them where you're like, yep, we're both struggling. I find that can sometimes help along the game and help bring up the mood a little bit, or just be a fan of other players at the table and kind of be excited to have that competition at the table. Maybe even call out things where if that player does something that blocks you from doing what you want to do, I usually like to call out and be like, hey, that was a good move. Like, yeah, that's what I was gonna do, and now I am kind of screwed on this next turn. Of course, you can walk in, there's a fine line between complaining about that player and then telling them they did a good job. So, you know, do that at your own risk. Overall though, I'm gonna get into some of the more solutions later on in the video. This one's kind of just one that as long as that player that's doing that complaining, maybe engaging in that defense mechanism a little bit, as long as they're still engaged with the game, I don't feel like this has to ruin game night. Ideally, you can kind of insulate yourself a little bit from that player's behavior and move on with the game, and as long as they're still providing that competition in the game, things I find can continue to go okay for the game night. Now, let's get into some of the more serious issues. This is going to kind of the mid-game. There's two things that I think happen, that I see happen in the mid-game. One is that players having their strategy blocked, and the second thing is a player being out of contention for the win. Both of these can lead to what I would call a degenerate game state. Now, degenerate game state is really just when kind of the structure that the game provides kind of falls apart. And I'm going to talk about that a little more after we talk about these two player behaviors. So first up is a strategy being blocked. I find that there's some players in some games where they become locked into a specific path to victory. Basically, they've set a set of railroad tracks. Now there's just no way to change course anymore. Then something happens. Maybe they miscalculated by like a resource or two. Maybe another player takes the action spot they needed. Just something, maybe an event in the game triggers. Either way, something happens and they just go, damn it! That's what I needed to do. So in this instant, like the game can take a pretty big turn for the worse because that player is instantly upset and their path wasn't a want, it was a need for them. And I think that this has maybe some relationship to kind of the alpha gamer problem, which I discussed in one of my earlier videos on the co-op, what I think I called the co-op gaming paradox or whatever. It's where a player has identified a path. Now in a co-op game, when that happens, when they identify that path to victory, I find that someone can kind of say that this is the route we need to take, and they can kind of take over that game because they see any deviation of that route being a loss condition. So if they are trying to pursue that victory condition, and like I said, this is kind of talking about that relationship to winning, like having that path locked in, even if it's just a perception of the best path, and it's not even the best path, they have that perception of that's the way to win the game, so that's the path they need to take. So that's the alpha gamer, and this is kind of like the, I would say maybe a bit of an analog in the competitive game, where they have locked in on that path and said, this is how I'm going to do well in this game, this is how I'm going to perform well in this is how people are going to judge me by doing well, right? So, but once that gets taken from them, that can instantly cause them to kind of enter that kind of emotional response, that negative response where it's saying like, my victory was just taken away from me, I can't do well in this game anymore, maybe people are gonna judge me, maybe I look stupid, you know, all those kind of internal things that maybe are unconsciously in the background, because I don't think that this is necessarily something that people are actively thinking during the game all the time. Of course, some people might be. I've got some bad anxiety, and I think I have some issues with that judgment stuff, so maybe those are conscious things, but a lot of players probably this is going to be unconscious just with how you perceive your relationship to winning and your judgments and your perceptions of how other people see you when you win or lose in a board game. Overall though, I would say this is there's not a lot you can do to help this player out anymore. It's just harming the mood. It's one of those things where as long as they stay engaged with the game, I think you can kind of salvage it. It's like, it's the same thing with complaining and whining. Like it's just I would call this another type of complaining and whining. As long as they stay engaged, the game maintains its structure and everyone can continue on. And once again, you kind of just have to insulate yourself a bit from that, realize that that's that player's struggles, not your struggles. Those are that player's emotions, and you only have control of your own emotions. Now, the next thing that is a little more serious and getting out of this complaining and whining zone is a player that is out of contention for the win. Now, I'm going to say that this is sometimes true. Like, there are some games I play where, yes, we get through the game state, and like maybe we're in the final round, and there's someone that, yeah, they literally just can't win. There's not enough points. There's not enough time for them to catch up to first place, and it's just like, yeah, they're out of that contention for the victory. Other times, though, I would say that the player doesn't have a full understanding of the scoring of the game. Maybe there's some in-game points and a lot of end-game points. Maybe they're going heavy on those end-game categories and they just don't have a lot of in-game points, so they look like they're far behind, but by the time the end game comes around, they're gonna launch way ahead. I find that sometimes that this perception of being out of contention for the win it's just a belief, an internal belief. But overall, I don't think it really matters if they're correct or incorrect on this. It's just, if they perceive that they're out of contention, then this is where those negative behaviors can come up. Because once again, it's that kind of relationship to victory and that relationship to winning. And it really depends. The next thing that happens is depends on how they relate to winning in the game. I believe there's kind of two paths that a player can take at this point once they're out of that contention to win. One is what I would say is the ideal path, is that they find a new personal victory condition. Now I'm going to reference So Very Wrong About Games again. Now this is something that I've done in my own games, but then they put a name to it and I'm going to use it. They called this kind of the moral victory. It's really setting a new personal goal for yourself. It's saying like, oh, I want to collect all of this set, or I want to try to trigger this combo, or take control of this area, or whatever. It's setting your own little personal goal for that game. Now, what's important about this is that this goal is still aligned with the victory system or the victory condition in the game. Like, you're still making some progress towards that. While maybe you're not in contention for the win, you are still getting points in some way that is moving you in that path, in that direction of victory. So the other thing that happens is, or the other choice a player has, if they don't do this personal victory condition thing, is that they can disengage with the victory conditions of the game. This is the path that I think leads to that degenerate game state. Basically, the game structure can start to fall apart. There's a few different choices a player can make when they disengage, but overall, the end result is really the same. They can waste their turns on pointless actions that don't really get them anywhere. This can take away from the tension for the other players, because maybe the game is 4 players and it kind of requires players to have those checks and balances on each other. And if one player just abandons the kind of those conditions that are, or those victory conditions that are kind of forcing them to be in contention and be providing that kind of tension and competitiveness for another player might just run away with it if they just kind of give up on it. And this can ruin the game for everyone else, because essentially that one player that decided to disengage gave another player a free path, and it's kind of like everyone else is now out of contention for the win. So to me, that takes away from kind of your core agreement when you started the game of saying like, hey, I'm going to be a competitive opponent. We'll come back to that after I'm done talking about some of these player behaviors. There's some things I would say are even, or just as bad, or actually probably even worse, because I've had players that have started taking actions that seem to have just no benefit for them at all. They even might be bad for them. But then when this player has been asked, they've said, oh, I'm not gonna win. I just don't want this other player to win. And it's that same thing where they've now disengaged with the victory condition of the game, and they've chosen in this case, they've chosen a personal goal of taking down another player. Now, while I said it's great to have a personal goal, it is important that that personal goal is still aligned with the victory conditions of the game. If your personal goal becomes, I want this other player to lose, you are not, I guess having the other players lose is technically kind of the winning state of the game, but that is not aligned with the victory condition of the game. You're not going for the points. You're not going for the area control at that point. You're just making sure someone else doesn't have those things, which is that is getting to that degenerate game state. So just to summarize these two things, it's really that when a player feels like their path to victory is gone, they really have two options. One is to find that kind of personal goal, or that way to have fun to pursue the victory conditions still. The other one is disengage from those victory conditions and really kind of lead to that degenerate game state. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the end game state. And here I would say this is where I've had the most negative experience with like the sore loser problem. this is probably brings up some of my worst experiences with games with sore losers, because I've had some players can be very explosive at the end of the game. Those emotions can kind of boil over, and I would say reach the point of yelling and being a bit more aggressive, and that's never a fun night at board game night. So once again, this is bringing out that relationship to winning. Like maybe they put a little too much value in doing well in that game. They put too much value in succeeding in that game. Maybe they put too much value in how, like I said before, how they think people will perceive them if they don't do well at that game. So in this case, the player may have it can be subtle, it can be like, oh, that game's dumb, don't like it, it was stupid, like I lost, and that just can kind of bring down the mood at the end of the game. And honestly, take away the joy for the person that won the game. Because you have someone that's a sore loser, it can be hard for that person that won the game to have any celebration. They're just like, I've been in the state where it's just like, okay, let's just pack this up and so we can move on with the night, right? But other times, I do want to call out that there's a bit of a difference between sore loser and criticizing games. I think it's perfectly acceptable for players to voice their opinion about a game, say it's not for them, or say it just wasn't like fun for me. Now, I've done this with games like, let's say, Agricola. Now don't worry, I see Agricola as an amazingly well-designed game. I just have no interest in playing it again. I have my reasons. I'll complain about the game more in another video, and maybe really rile some people up, get some of that sweet engagement that YouTube wants. So hopefully we'll get something about that in the future. But overall, it's just this case where not every game is for everyone. And there's just a line between how you kind of want to handle this end game. So one, I think try not to be a sore loser. Like, understand that you're not going to win every game, so it's totally fine to lose games, and no one's going to judge you for it. Like, I lose so many games, and I don't think anyone judges me for it. So the other thing is to don't be rude to the person who brought the game and taught it. They were probably excited about this, and they spent time learning that game and teaching that game. So thank them for the teach. Tell them that you're glad that you got to experience it. Say it wasn't for you. Like, totally fine. And then if you know the person better, you can maybe dive into some criticisms. Like, for example, if you're ever playing a game with me, I love to hear criticism of the game. I love to break down games. I break down games that I enjoy playing. I break down games that I love playing. I complain about games that I love playing sometimes, but because I like talking about the design and the structure of the game, and maybe the design elements that work for me and don't work for me. So if you do that to the person, sometimes that can be a really fun conversation. So overall, though, I do want to call out that, yeah, the sore loser, that's another difficult one. Getting into, once again, that's another category of that's the extreme of the complaining and whining. And really that extreme of that relationship to winning is maybe a little too strong, or some sort of relationship to their perception of winning or doing well. Now, I'm going to gloss over one issue here. Actually, I'm glossing over a few because I can't touch on everything with this. There's another issue that gets I would say, a bit of a bad rap, and that's Kingmaking. Now, Kingmaking is definitely an issue in games, but I think it's a little overblown in a lot of games. I actually think that sometimes when Kingmaking comes up, it was more of a game timing issue. Like, if I am in a position where I am in first, but another player has control of my victory at the end of the game, then to me, I didn't time that game correctly. I did not time my moves correctly. And that brings out the next play is going to be an interesting puzzle to me, figuring out how to manage that timing, figuring out how to manage the tempo of the game so I don't have to be in that position where someone else is in control of my victory condition. Now, I'm not going to say that means victory or Kingmaking never exists. 100% does. I have been in situations where, yeah, like a player doesn't have that, or has only choices to let one player or another player win. I would say that the main call out I want to make on Kingmaking is that there's two different approaches to the player that's in that situation. One is, like I said before, they continue to engage with the game's victory conditions. They continue to pursue their things in their own benefit. Now, I think that some things get called out as Kingmaking that technically aren't, and that's because that different players will have different perceptions of value of things. Maybe one player values getting control of one area versus getting control of another area, or another player values a different area or whatever. And maybe they have a similar point value, but one area takes points away from the leader and one area takes points away from the second place guy. But maybe that player sees the first place area as being like part of the area that they're already in control of, and maybe there's a set they're trying to do or whatever, who knows. But either way, they may have a different perception of the value. And I would highly recommend just this perception of like what a victory is in a game. I think So Very Wrong About Games, in that episode I mentioned, they have a great conversation about Zoo Vetus, about that kind of victory condition and how players can kind of perceive what a win is differently. And I think as long as the player is making a choice that is in their best interest, in their perception of what is getting them closer to victory, then that's a totally valid move at the end of the game. If they make a choice that has no benefit to them, that's where we run into king-making issues, and that's where we get back into that degenerate game state. Like I said, it's the state where they are no longer pursuing those victory conditions, and once you kind of disengage from kind of that scaffolding, from that structure the game provides, that's when the game starts to fall apart. Now, king-making, this is one where I don't really necessarily call this one out as the relationship to winning is the big part, so I actually wrote a ton more on king-making, but I'm going to leave this for another video, because I have a lot I want to say about a couple games like Inish and Zoo Vetus that really bring out this concept of king-making a little more, and so keep an eye out for another video on king-making. So before moving on to solutions, I kind of want to just summarize this a bit. I want to bring up a quote from Knizia. You know, you may have heard of him. He's designed a few board games, but this quote kind of triggered some of the ideas I had in this video. And he says that when playing a game, the goal is to win, but it is the goal that is important, not the winning. Now, note that I mildly hate using this quote, because this is so close, just saying it's the journey that matters, not the destination. Like it's basically adjacent to it. There's a billion ways this has been said. So Knizia is talking about board games here though, and you know, I'm talking about board games, so you know, match made in heaven type of thing, so I had to use this version. But this quote does tie us back to where I began. Winning is the goal of the game. So winning is the structure of the game. Winning provides you with a reason for taking your actions. So Knizia's quote makes a clear distinction between the goal of the game and winning a game. So the goal is the journey, and the winning is that possible destination, right? The destination is what driving your choices and actions. The quote summarizes that choice that I talked about earlier. Basically, a player needs to choose to continue to engage with the goal of winning, even if it doesn't seem possible. That's how you avoid those degenerate game states. When players sit down to a board game, when they sit down to a board game, they are entering an agreement. They are agreeing to always take actions to better their standing in the game, even if they think they can't win. So it's disengaging with the goal, is breaking that agreement, and puts the joy of game night at risk. Okay, great. So how do I explain this to other players without being a jerk? Yeah. Sorry, like I said, you can't control another player's emotions. You can only control your own. But you know, hey, do you have some of these issues? Have you done something at game night and regretted it? Have you complained, whined, disengaged from a game, potentially harming the experience of other players at the table? Like I said before, I'm not perfect. I have done some of these things. And I think that we all deserve to have the best possible time at game night. Some people, this is the only night of the week they're going to be able to do this. They only get one board game night a week. I'm super fortunate that I get to play 2 or 3 times a week. Whereas others, this is, and I play with some other people where this is going to be their only night of the week. And I think it's unfortunate if they have that bad experience at game night. I want everyone to have a good time when they come out for game night. So how do we do this? How do we kind of, not really fix ourselves, but you know, improve ourselves, improve our experiences, improve, maybe even bring a little more energy and a more excitement to the game night to also improve the experience for others and maybe improve the mood of others. I think this comes into where players need to put a little more thought into winning. And once again, it's not necessarily into winning, it's put a little more thought into your relationship to winning. So what behaviors, conscious or unconscious, are being triggered by the desire to win? So we all have the desire to win, like it's fun to win at a board game. And let's actually talk about 2 things that I think you can do to kind of improve these things. And that's actually getting into this scenery I have next to me here. You know, I have a pile of board games, because that's what I'm talking about. When I was setting this video, I looked at my desk and I was like, that looks super boring, so I had to throw something on here. I got the pile of board games over here, doesn't matter which one. And then on my left here, I got a stack of some mindfulness books, because we're gonna talk a little bit about that in this next section here. So first up is, I think people need to celebrate their winners. Like, it's fun to win. But people tend not to gloat. Like, gloating is considered poor behavior. And I think that kind of sucks, right? Like, when we play board games, someone is gonna end up victorious. And it's like, we get in that state where the first place player doesn't wanna make other players feel bad. But I don't think that's how it should be. I think everyone should be like, damn, like you did awesome. Like, holy crap, like that strategy was amazing. Like, I can't believe you pulled it off. Like, totally well done in that game. I think players need to be a little more, I guess, open to allowing themselves to be a fan of other people's experience and a fan of their winning at a board game. Because wouldn't you want that to happen to you? Don't you want other people to kind of celebrate you win? Don't you want to be able to kind of bask in that victory a little more? Like I said before, I lose quite a few board games, so you know that 1 out of every 4 that I win, I would like to celebrate more. And I think that this really can help with that relationship to winning. When it's not just you that needs to win the game to have a good time, but you can kind of still have that good time and bring out some of that joy for other people too. And this aligns with something else I want to mention, and this is in relation to being a good TTRPG player. So I heard this on Quinn's Quest. I think it was associated with the Mothership episode, and he was talking about an entry in the Warden's Manual. Could be wrong about that, but moving on. So he said that being a good player means being a fan of your other players' characters at the table. You should be excited when they do something good, and I would say voice that. Tell them, like, hell yeah, well done. I think this is also true in board games. So sure, you're in a competition, but you're also there to socialize and hang out with friends. If you weren't there to hang out with other people or to socialize, then you could just be at home playing a video game or be on VGA or something, right? So why not maximize your experience? Be impressed with the other player's actions. Give them a great move that's locking in a ton of points. And basically, don't you want someone to recognize when you're doing something great? So I think we can all take something out of that and bring a little more energy and a little more excitement to the other players at our table, and not just be kind of stuck in your own world all the time, and really kind of be more engaged with the table and the other players' actions and be a fan of what they're doing at the table. So number 2 is getting into the stack of mindfulness books over here, is setting an intention for yourself at game night. Now I know mindfulness, self-help stuff, that stuff's all over the place. But like, seriously, if you have these problems, like, have you thought about how you're going to address them? If you've done any of these things, have you thought about this? Have you thought about how to avoid that next time? So I think this all comes down to just deciding for yourself, like, what is your goal at board game night? Like, is it to win? If you answered yes, then great. I think that's totally okay. Is it to crush your friends and prove you're smart? Like, maybe that's what you actually want to do. At least in this case, you know that's why you're there. Now, I think there's So Very Wrong About Games also has 2 groups of gamers they call out. They call the filthy casuals and the sweaty tryhards. I am squarely in the filthy casuals. So if you're going to board game night to win, then you're probably in the filthy or the sweaty tryhards, right? So different category of gamer entirely, but I think it's totally okay if that's what you want to do. You just need to find those other sweaty tryhards to play board games with. But for a lot of people I play with, I would say more likely their goal is to have a good time. Maybe it's to enjoy the puzzle of the board game. Maybe it's to enjoy the company of other people and to basically just enjoy the interaction that those games enable. So maybe it's a little time to put a little more thought into this goal, because unfortunately, the board game itself, as I mentioned, it kind of says that your goal is to win. So you enter the board game with those victory points at the end of the teach. You're usually given like, okay, this is your victory condition for the game. This is how you win the game, and you're kind of just, this goal is thrusted upon you. I think we can do a little bit better, and we can set our own goal for the game night. So maybe something that you could do is to actually state your intention. Maybe go something like this. Like, my intention tonight is to enjoy whatever game I get to play, to thank the person that I taught, even if the game isn't for me, and to be grateful for having a group to play board games with. I would say even better, like, write it down. Write it down and sign it. There's research showing that actually kind of writing this commitment down and putting it in on paper can significantly improve your success with kind of hitting that goal or kind of recognizing these things. I don't think this is going to fix everything immediately if you do have any of these issues or if you have done these things in the past. I think this just will kind of give you some focus on that. So it's kind of like the concept of meditation, where you're trying to constantly return to this kind of point of focus. So over time, the behavior will improve. Your responses to other people's behavior could even improve. So basically, this will kind of put you on that path to avoiding bad board game nights. So that's going to do it for today. And overall, I just want to state that I honestly believe that we all deserve to have a great time playing board games. I think there's a good number of toxic behaviors. I definitely did not cover them all in this video. I have more to talk about. But for now, we're just going to focus on kind of this core relationship with winning and kind of some of these things that emerge from board games. Overall, I think that we don't want to ruin someone else's game that they're excited about. You also don't want them to do that to you. So basically, if you have a player with some of these issues at your table, maybe share this video. Maybe be like, hey, I found this cool new YouTube channel where the production is meh, but content's kind of cool, so maybe check it out. I also touched on a few topics that I'll be having more Table Talk episodes on. So like the Kingmaking topic that I mentioned, and then I also completely ignored analysis paralysis. That's because I don't think it's necessarily the relationship to winning driving that, but I have a really cool idea for that video coming up. And yeah, we'll see where things take us. So overall, thanks for watching. I really do hope you found some of this discussion interesting and maybe helpful. Let me know your thoughts on this, and let me know if you think I missed anything. Then, as a standard for YouTube videos, please like and subscribe. Seriously, now that I'm making content, I can't tell you how much that even means. I'm even doing it more for other videos I watch because it's a huge boost. So I'll end it with saying, be a team player, cheer for your players, and then of course if you found it interesting, click that thumbs up button.